Hi. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Jess, and I'm very honored to be your moderator for today's panel titled The Business Case for Setting and Achieving Science-Based Targets. So as the title suggests, today we'll be discussing about the important role that science-based targets has for businesses as well as in achieving and pushing the climate agenda. So science-based targets has become the gold standard for carbon climate target setting, as well as in sustainability reporting, providing companies with a clear framework to set ambitious as well as credible targets, which aligns with the 1.5 degrees goal of the Paris Agreement. And it also helps distinguish genuine decarbonization efforts from mere corporate greenwashing, which is a concern for many companies today. So despite the remarkable growth of science-based targets initiative globally, so as what Daddy mentioned just now, there was 5,000 plus companies which has already committed to science-based targets. Only about 2% are from ASEAN, and only 18 companies are based in Malaysia who has committed to the science-based targets. So in this panel, we will be exploring the important role, the why of setting science-based targets with my panelists here from the telco, from energy, from engineering consultancy services industry. And they will be sharing about their perspectives, their motivation, as well as their experiences, their challenges, and their successes through their science-based targets journey. So before we begin this panel, maybe let's have a quick poll to assess the pulse of the audience today. So can I have the poll questions up, please? So can I encourage each of you to take out your phones just to answer some of the questions? We have 3 questions here. The first question is, which of the following reasons does your organization consider the most significant to prioritize decarbonization efforts? Please select one. So you can go to menti.com and key in the code 74659191. Okay, so majority are saying that, no, it became 36%. No, I'll wait. Okay, majority is saying that we believe that it increases our resilience and competitiveness with upcoming global or local regulations. And the second one, the second highest is we believe that it's the right thing to do because they want to address climate change. So that's what we have. Okay. Yeah, so but majority of it, of the audience believe that setting science-based target can help increase your resilience and competitiveness with upcoming global or local regulations. So let's go to the next one. Okay, so the next question is, in the next 12 months, your organization is interested in, please select one. What's this? Okay, a majority of this, I can't really see what's the response to it. Okay, so majority of you has already set a net zero target, or maybe some has set science-based targets. So what I believe is the next step is what align with what Jens is saying, which is to accelerate, and now it's time to act now, which is to realize your science-based targets or your net zero commitment. And let's have the last question. Okay, while you're answering the last question, let me save some time and introduce our panelists for today. So my first panelist here is Adeline. She brings a wealth of experience and expertise in the field of sustainability, and she currently holds the position of Head of Sustainability at Axiata Group, a leading telco company. With over 20 years of experience in operations, consulting, and corporate planning, Adeline's focus lies on environmental management and sustainability. Her areas of expertise include developing greenhouse gas emissions inventory, sustainability strategy, disclosure and reporting, and verification of non-financial data. So at Axiata, she has led the development of their net zero carbon roadmap, fostering collaboration both internally and externally. So the next panelist is Datuk Dennis. With over 30 years of experience in engineering and management, Datuk Dr. Dennis serves as the CEO of MinConsult, a renowned engineering consultancy. He has advised multiple governments and developed MinConsult into a significant international engineering force, with projects covering over 25 countries in 5 continents. Datuk Dennis is also a pioneer in RE projects and is the founder of the Timeless Green Group of companies. And our finalist here in the middle is Mohammed Irwan, who flew all the way from Sarawak. He's the General Manager of Sustainability at Sarawak Energy. With over 24 years of experience in the power utility and clean energy financing sector, Irwan is responsible for developing and implementing sustainability strategies at Sarawak Energy. He has established a robust sustainability reporting mechanism and governance structure, integrating sustainability practices into the company's business processes. So with that, can you please give a round of applause to our panelists for today? Okay, thank you very much. And let's have a look at the final results of the questions that we asked. Okay, so which of the following challenges do you consider as the most significant when setting and achieving science-based targets? Majority is getting accurate and comprehensive data on emissions across the value chain. So later maybe I'll ask some of you to address this too. The second one is financial constraints and lack of government incentives, but majority problem is the data issue. Okay, so with that, we have gauged the pulse of the room, and let's dive right into our panel discussion. So first, we will talk about motivation. So panelists, I would like to hear about the why of you setting science-based targets. You could have set a net zero target, so why did you set a science-based target? So maybe I'll direct the first question to you, Datuk Dennis, on what was your target and what was your motivation?
We have 3 motivations for doing this. So number 1 is we must act now. So as engineers, we are very much at the forefront of climate resilience, and we really feel the impact of it. So in terms of rainfall data, we now have something called a climate change factor, and we've had to increase in certain parts of the country rainfall design by 50% because of climate change. Wind speeds in certain parts of the country, we increase it by 10%. So the impacts are really serious, and we have to act now. The latest IPCC report is very alarming. In all likelihood, we're going to cross 1.5 degrees. But there's also a glimmer of hope. But we must all act. We must all act together, and we must all act now. Number 2, these pledges are fast going from a nice to have to a must have. So internationally, more and more organizations are asking, as an organization, what are you doing in terms of pledges? And it's now becoming like a minimum bar to go in, especially if you work like we do for ADB, World Bank, UNOPS, UNICEF, World Vision. All these organizations and all these clients kind of demand this from you. So you need to go with the market. And then lastly, we believe in the good business doing good. So not always, environmental projects are just a cost. So we've developed a lot of projects which have been very beneficial to our client, and very good for the environment and good returns for them. So good examples, we're now developing a 1 megawatt biogas plant for pig waste in Penang. It's an immense, great environmental benefit to solve this age-old problem, but also gives good returns to the developer.
Great, thank you. How about you, Irwan?
Okay, I think Thank you so much, Jess. I think for Sarawak Energy, the business proposition is very clear. All right, if you talk about going to 1.5 degrees C or net zero, business position is very clear for us. Number one, if we want to achieve something, we need to have a proper structure. We need to follow a certain guideline or certain methodology how we're going to achieve it. So SBTi is one we identified. If we want to go there, we should be using SBTi because data is crucial as what survey been done. We need to have the data, we need to understand the data, we need to analyze it and so on. And by having a clear targets for us, then we can think of how we're going to achieve it, be it technology, be it human capital, or be it nature-based project, for example. Because we know where we are going, we know what's our projection, then we know how to achieve it. And this is important to get the highest level of approval from the board members. Once they agree to this, then easier we can cascade it down, right? And we can use this to communicate throughout the company. Okay, this is the commitment by the companies, by the top management. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to measure, and we need to monitor the progress and report the progress. So I think that's why we opt for science-based targets. As a power utilities in Sarawak, we also export to Indonesia as well. Hopefully in the future to Singapore. We feel that we have a role to play. As long as we're able to reduce the footprint, it will be benefited to our client. Right? For example, our bulk customer, press metal or OM, they are importing to Europe because the footprint is very important once they introduce the CBAM. That's the way we look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Adeline?
I think for us, it's really, signing up to SBTi means signing up to the science. It's also aligning ourselves to a lot of the other, the other global requirements that's out there. There's the climate agreement, there's a Paris agreement, and even for the telco industry specifically, we have this thing called, zero, where telco companies are encouraged to sign up to the net zero target by 2050. So I think these are all the alignment that we do. But more important than that, what you will find in the telco company is that through the enablement effect, we have the potential to reduce emissions by 10 times more than what we produce through all the facilitating of technology that we enable, all your smart technology. So, when you have cloud, when you have the network, this allows you to be more efficient. You can have more sustainable farming, you can have more sustainable fishing. So I think these are one of the important roles of the telco within this industry. But I think more important than that, also signing up to a global agenda also enables you to have that conversation, with like-minded people throughout your entire supply chain, to your peers across sectors as well, to seek for a way of, actually achieving that target. So I think that concrete target, having it ahead of you, really helps you to define your direction and will require for you to partner, speak to others in order to find that solution.
Okay, thank you very much. So from what I'm listening is it's a strategic imperative as well as the time to act now, and to have that kind of conversations that normally you wouldn't have unless you set such an ambitious target where everyone should be involved into this sort of conversations. So the next question that I have, of course, setting targets is one thing, but to achieve them is another. So action speaks louder than words, right? So the next question that I have for our panelists here today is, what are the progress and initiatives that you have done since you have committed to the science-based targets? So the first person that I want to direct the question to is Sarawak Energy, Irwan. Reason being, Sarawak Energy is the first out of the 3 companies you committed in 2020. So what have you been doing since then?
A lot, actually. Okay, I think in terms of progress, I think for SBTi, I think DD is here. We are going through the validation process. We submitted in November last year. So in March, they're going through the pre-screening process. Our first submission got rejected because we forgot to there are certain requirements we forgot to calculate, and we submit in April, got rejected some more. Okay, so we correct it. For example, to really do it, I think from that point around, because I think this is very new. Okay, not many consultants really understand it. Honestly, this is my honest feedback. We decide not to go for the consultant. We do it our own. Right, so now we are already resubmit, and hopefully by this month we will get the by validations. Didi, if you can check with HQ, okay, hopefully we can get it by this month. All right, our commitment. In terms of that's our progress, and then moving forward on the what we are doing, since we already understand where's the targets 2030. So what we're going to do? So last year. Our board already approved our strategy, sustainability strategy and roadmap. One of this strategy is going toward for 1.5 degrees C. All right, so that's our KPI this year. So we have a lot of workshops. Thanks to UN Global Compact, they also facilitate this workshop. So with all our our process owner or our function or other departments within Sarawak Energy, we want everyone to have a say what they can do in terms of mitigation, what they can do in terms of adaptation, what they can do in terms of building business resilience. All right. So tomorrow will be our last workshop. So then, looking at all this data and whatever feedback that we get, so we can have, hopefully with all this input, we can come out with a clear roadmaps and clear target when we should be having this, when we should be having this, and so on. So every year, this will be presented to the board because the roadmap will valid up to 2025. Then 2025 onward, we have a new roadmap and strategy moving forward. So that's what we are doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Irwan, also for being very honest. I hope you get your targets validated very soon. And now, my next question, of course, I'm directing it to Adeline. Reason being, Axiata has committed to the science-based targets in 2021. And in your net zero carbon roadmap that you have been spearheading, I know that you're saying that by 2023, you are going to aim to set a Scope 3 emissions baseline as well as target. So maybe you can share more about this area.
All right. So we're in the midst of getting ready for our validation. So I think the past 2 years, I think there's been a lot of focus on the Scope 1 and 2. I think that's always the easier numbers because it's your own. You have control over it. And typically, as part of our reporting cycle, we also get it validated. The more ambiguous and the more difficult one is always the Scope 3. And but the good news about Scope 3 for the telco is that sure what's wrong. Maybe I need to use 2 mics at the same time. You see, okay. So the good news for telco companies is that the GSMA, which is like the telco industry body based out of Europe, they work together with all the telcos, and in June this year, they came up with a methodology in terms of how we should be calculating our Scope 3. So I think that really helps because there is a single way of doing it, and this is something which I find a bit more collaborative that you will see within the telco industry. So we have also started on our Scope 3. Trying to determine our Scope 3 baseline. Similarly, we started with doing it in-house. I think it's always important to do it yourself first, so you then understand the gaps, and you also understand where does this data reside, and that also spurs conversation internally. That means you need to talk to your procurement, you need to talk, for our case, because we have operating companies operating outside of Malaysia, we are also forced to go to them and have these conversations. So we have a prelim number, but now that we have it, we are also looking for a third party to come in to help to validate and to set, especially the Scope 3 target, because I think the target setting for Scope 3 is a bit more tricky in terms of, a lot of it you don't have control. So setting the target also means having a clear mandate or clear direction in terms of how you want to achieve it, and also understanding the trajectory in terms of the emission reduction. So I think that's where we are, but definitely starting on this journey have spurred really a lot of conversation throughout all functions within the organization. So, we have our chief technology officer, from a technology perspective, how are we making our network greener? From a procurement perspective, strategy as well. So I think that is really important. Sometimes it's also embracing the journey, to get to the end of the validation, but, that's where we are. And, hoping for the best. To get through our validation this year. We're looking at November this year to get it done.
Okay, thank you, Adeline. And now to Dato' Dennis, because Dato' Dennis, it's very interesting. I saw recently on your LinkedIn that you're actually going to submit your target for validation. And to be honest, Consult only committed to the science-based target last year, 2022. So by right, they're supposed to submit their targets for validation in 2 years. But they've actually submitted, I'm not sure about submitting, but you are planning, submitted earlier, and that's 1 year earlier. So please tell us, congrats on that. Tell us, how did you do it? And also what other milestone have you achieved since committing?
Thank you. So I think, as YB mentioned, in terms of the construction sector in general, we're a bit slower. So we're a bit behind them as well. But we are the first in ASEAN to do this, to make the pledge. So we made the pledge in February of last year. And as you mentioned, we had 2 years to submit our targets with all the backup data and the evaluation for scope 1, 2, and 3. We submitted in January of this year. So just over 1 year ahead of schedule. One advantage, of course, is we're an engineering company. So a lot of these calculations we're already doing for our clients. So it's just doing it for ourselves. The scope 3 always took a bit more time. So the scope 1 and 2, actually, we did it very fast. Within a few months, 3 months or 4 months. The scope 3 took a bit more time. So we submitted it. We've been through the pre-screening process. And we've been told that assessors will be appointed to us soon. And then we'll start this fun process which Iran went through. Hopefully not as painful as you guys, but maybe, I don't know, we'll see. But hopefully the next few months we'll get through the validation process.
Great. Thanks. Oh, by the way, guys, if you have any questions for the panelists, because we are seeing a lot of very interesting things here and I'm being notified that it's Q&A session. Okay, please scan this QR code and post your questions here. But meanwhile, I would like to direct my next question to you, Adeline. What I'm hearing is there's a lot of benefits from setting science-based target, especially getting the communication around it from different functions. So maybe you can expand a little bit from there. What was the benefits that you have derived from setting science-based targets?
All right. So I was at the same symposium here last year, and I think that time we came up with our net zero climate roadmap. So I think that has come a long way. That has, I think, again, internally, it has provided certain level of direction to everyone, that, these are basically the 3 objectives. This is what we need to do as an organization. But apart from the roadmap, I think the governance around really making this happen is also important. So what we saw last year is in June last year, we established our board sustainability committee. I think that's key because that gives sustainability the forum or the room, to have that discussion. Because sometimes if you were to rely on the main board, you may not have that much of time for you to discuss sustainability. So we have that BSC now. And then because of all these net zero, signing up to TCFD as well, we also had to relook our sustainability framework. How is it positioned? How is it also aligning to all the different stakeholder requirements? How is it aligning to the overall business strategy? So we also launched what we call a refreshed sustainability metrics. And when to do that also, we went through the list of all our material matters again to see why is it important, how is it important. And I think one of the most important thing that I feel, as an organization we successfully did is that we have 4 pillars within our framework. And for each one of those pillars, we have managed to set an external target Because prior to this, we only had one, which is an environmental related target. But, as we start really looking at what we need to do, what you find is that target setting is really, really important. In whatever you do, you need to have a target. And when you have targets, then it becomes easier because it fits into your business planning. Automatically, when our operating companies are planning for their next business cycle, they also need to take into account how are they going to meet these targets. And now this is also slowly leading into embedding these targets as KPIs for our senior management team. So I think that really enables whatever that you have on paper and make it actionable. So I think these are some of the progress that we've seen from the time we developed our net zero carbon roadmap to where we are today.
Okay, thank you. So we often hear about the benefits of setting science-based targets, like what Daddy has mentioned and the Minister has mentioned just now, maybe increasing reputation, fulfilling shareholders' requirements, reputation, so on and so forth. So of course, it's something exciting, but of course we want to acknowledge that it's not always a walk in the park. It's not always easy to set science-based targets. So we want to learn from those who have experienced it. So maybe my question now is directed to you, Dato' Dennis, as well as Irwan, on what is the biggest lessons that you have learned from setting science-based targets?
I think the biggest challenges for us was getting over our fear and ignorance. As an engineering company, we said, there's no way today we can be net zero because we know what technology is out there, and it just put a fear in us to achieve it. But if we were going to do it, we're going to do SBTi. We're going to go for the gold standard. Yeah. So if we're going to play football, it's always Premier League. We're not going to do Division 1, Division 2. So when we engage with SBTi, actually they're quite understanding of the scenario. So what you do is you set an intermediate target of 50% reduction. That's a lot by 2030. It's a lot, but it's achievable. And what you realize is there's a lot of nascent technology that will take you to the 100%. The second 50% is very, very tough. And frankly, the technologies are not out there at the moment. Yeah. But from 2030 to 2050, there's a lot of technologies being developed, and we did a lot of research into this. So we are quite confident that those nascent technologies will come into place in that period 2030 to 2050 to help us with the last 50%. So it's about getting over fear and ignorance.
Yeah, I think the main challenges, because we are the first one to sign in 2020 the pledge toward 1.5 degrees C and net zero. I think the main challenges before was to get a buy-in from the management, from the CEO level and on management level, basically. So that was the challenge. So I think we passed that. Moving forward, it's all about looking at the data, because currently, the way when we submit our SBTi validation, basically we are using a default emission factors. We don't have our own emission factors. So the way we look at it, that's why it's good for a company to use SBTi, because it's very clear how you're going to achieve it. And it's very clear how you, as a company or corporation, link to Paris Agreement. So you understand how it's been cascaded down up to company level. And for us, it's almost every day is learning experience for us. For example, currently, before this, we don't have anyone to look at life cycle assessment, okay, for the whole corporate. Now we have that function. Before this, we don't have someone looking at doing decision making, what sort of criteria we need to embed. Now we have that. It's part of our KPI this year. What sort of indicators or criteria we need to embed in, for example, internal carbon pricing and so on. So I think challenges, yes, there will be always a challenge to anything. Just that by understanding where we are, what targets we need to achieve, I think, and having colleagues to really share the challenges, Simda B always talk about what's the issue on submitting, have you been rejected, whatsoever. So let's create this ecosystem lah, if we want to manage the challenge. Honestly, if I just compare 2 years ago and compare where we are now, I think I'm quite confident that we're going to achieve it because we have other colleagues that are also in the same journey. So that gives a bit of motivations in moving forward. Right? Thank you.
Thank you. So hopefully more and more people will sign up for science-based targets so we can have more conversations like this. All right, so now I don't want to spend so much time asking my questions because there's a lot of questions coming in for our panelists. So can we have a show of the questions? Let's rattle through the questions. There's a lot and we have 10 minutes. So I'll go with the highest ranking. Oh, okay. Someone is asking, can you please share some strategies to decarbonize your Scope 3 supply chain emissions? So by the way, we have another panel session coming up later, which is moderated by Adeline, who is sitting here smiling. But maybe our panelists, do you want to address a little bit about how are you, what strategies are you using to decarbonize your Scope 3 emissions?
I think for us, number one, create awareness. All right, for all our vendors. That's why we're working together. I think Roy, Alliance Bank, try to work on something, how we able, number one, to create awareness, and number two is to create, if we can, give them a bit of motivation, how to move forward. All right, so at least for time being, they agree, they are going for doing reporting to us. Okay, as a start. We don't make it compulsory yet, but maybe 3 years from now, we make it compulsory for all our vendors to report this and that. But it should be gradually lah. You just imagine vendors in Sarawak, in Kuching, suddenly impose, you need to do this, you need to do this. For sure, they will be facing a bit of difficulties lah. But we are having that awareness. We have 20 vendors going through assess program with GCNY, so we need to continuously do that. I think in terms of decarbonizing Scope 3, that will be apart from we are doing our own calculations or measurement. That will be the strategy that we are adopting lah. So the rest of it will be 2025 onward lah. Need to revise the strategy. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, maybe the next question. So the next question is, how do you meet emissions targets when a company is expanding, which may lead to higher emissions despite practices to reduce emissions on existing business operations? Maybe Dato' Dennis, do you want to answer this?
Yeah, you have to reduce your per capita emissions. Yeah, so that's it, and you have to factor in the growth of the company. All of us assume that our companies will grow, but underneath that growth, you just have to reduce your per capita consumption, and there's a number of strategies for that. It starts off with behavioral, so we get a lot of savings just from behavioral changes. So actually, I've not worn a shirt and long sleeve shirt and jacket for literally weeks, because in our office we've increased the temperature to 26 degrees, and in doing so, we reduce our energy consumption by 15%. It's just behavioral changes, yeah. But then, of course, you have to implement technologies like photovoltaic cells and all that sort of stuff. So you need to reduce enough to compensate for the growth.
Maybe I'll just add on. I think the beauty of SBTi is they tend to look at absolute emissions instead of intensity. So what that simply means is that signing up to SBTi also means that you are committed to doing something absolutely in a different way lah. If it's business as usual, then I don't think you will be able to meet your goals. If you are, just for example, my previous company, we are we do manufacturing, and one of the things that they look at is you look at your entire manufacturing line and see at which point you can totally eliminate certain steps to not emit. By eliminating that step altogether, you can reduce X amount of emissions. For us in telco, I think it's also a challenge for us. How do we drive advocacy around access to more renewables? unlike a lot of companies who have, space on their roof to set up solar, we don't. So what is our advocacy route? How do we talk to the management? How do we talk to the government to get them to also understand our challenge and help us to get more access to renewables? So it's a lot about moving out of your comfort zone and really deciding to do things in a totally different manner in order to achieve these SBTi goals.
Okay, thank you. Another question that I saw just now was very interesting. Wait, I missed it. It was about some technology. Hang on. Oh, okay. So there's one question. So for pioneers, technologies are still very nascent and very costly, as what you mentioned, Dato' Dennis. So the price of solar panel now versus 10 years ago. So can you discuss the cost or benefits of starting early?
Definitely, prices are going down. I mean, in general, prices are going down. So there is actually advantage in delaying in terms of cost. The implementation of this, because quite often as the early movers, you're pioneering technologies, there's no proven technology. So actually it's quite the opposite. In some ways, by going first, you kind of pay a greater hurdle price. But there always has to be a pioneer, right? That's how the world changes. If everyone does business as usual, the world's not going to change, and we need to change the world.
Okay, thank you. I'm being notified that we are at for our last few minutes. So I would like to wrap up the discussion, but I saw a very interesting question right here, and I don't want to miss it. And so the question is, how best to sway leadership or management and your board to think of this as a strategic advantage and not a requirement? So I want to direct my question to both Irwan as well as Adeline, because as experienced chief sustainability officers or head of sustainability, how would you advise your peers on how do you convince the board that this is a very important initiative to take?
I think a lot of the answers was there just now. I think the fear is numbers. You will be afraid to sign up to something if the numbers, there's a lot of ambiguity. So I think that is one part that you need to convince the board. And then the second fear is cost. There's a cost to doing this. To address the question of cost, you need to have a target first. Because when you have the target, then you can start working out, based on different trajectories, how much is it going to cost you? If you think you're not going to meet your target, how many % off are you going to be? If you think you can meet your target, how much is it going to cost you? So I think that will help you answer the question. And I think the third fear is really capability lah. Sometimes the top management also want to know that they have a team that's capable to do this. Otherwise, it's also quite scary lah. Everyone is kind of like in the same boat, and everyone is learning. But the good news is that with more and more companies signing up to SBTi, I think like what Irwan also mentioned, there's a lot of circles, peer circles for us to do sharing. UNGC organized quite a lot of this. You do see a lot of programs coming up. So I think the infrastructure is there to build capability. So is that investment as well that the management need to look into to really, develop people in this space to be able to come up with the analysis, with the, with the narrative, with the graphs and the explanations to convince the board or the senior leadership team to embark on this. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think in terms of convincing the board and top management, number one, value proposition need to be clear. I think put yourself into board members. They want to see facts. They want to see how it will impact them. So it's important to have all this ready, do a proper analysis, get the trend, understand the trend and so on. So using the external trend to push internal. So our strategy, sustainability teams, we always, sometimes it's quite difficult for management to listen from internal people. I'm from Tenaga before, jadi Mitsubishi and Sarawak Energy, that's the culture. But let's say we are inviting someone from external, all right, someone with the credential to talk about it. I think we will have a better chance to get it through lah. All right. So honestly, we always write how external factors, which is very true. Honestly, 2020 ago when we got the approval to go ahead, we don't have these external factors. We have, but it's just theoretical. But now, all our Sukuk investors asking for it, all our customer asking for it, all our financer asking for it. So only now I don't have to speak anymore. It's just auto cruise, and our team will be very busy in putting everything together. So that's the scenario lah. Just to support what Adeline was sharing. It's just, to me, just do it. Understand where you are going, and definitely different corporation will have different priorities. So look at that. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. And now, Dato' Dennis, the last question for you is, what would you say to companies out there who are putting off setting science-based targets just because they have other conflicting priorities?
I think my advice is overcome your fear of this subject. You do that by arming yourself with knowledge. I think sessions like today are very, very useful so that you can learn from others and make yourself more comfortable with it. We ourselves have got something called the MinConsult Sustainability Toolbox, which we use for the construction sector, which we share with our clients to help you to get over this. But this is a subject that you must prepare yourself and your company for, because climate change is the single biggest issue for our decade.
Thank you very much, Dato' Dennis. And now we are at the end of our conversation. And thank you so much for sharing your insights as well as your experiences. I hope all of you have learned something as well as, can take away something to your organizations. And with that, we shall end the session, and I'll pass it back to the MC of today.
Thank you, Ms. Jess, for your moderation, and Dr. Dennis, Mr. Iran, and Ms. Adeline for your insightful contributions and valuable perspectives on the business case for setting and achieving science-based targets.